Hello and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of April. This is April. Our book this month is The Breakaways by the fantastic Cathy G. Johnson. Yay! Yay! There you go. Yay! Thank you. Who's sitting right here beside me? Hi, Cathy.
Hi, Brian.
Welcome, and
Hi.
thanks for coming out. Cathy came all the way from Rhode Island, so that's a long way to come to come and talk to you guys and talk to everybody out there.
Yeah.
Let me also, before we totally get started, because I always forget to do this, I want to thank my sponsors at The Beat.
Thank you, Beat.
I think the best comics-related news site. It's the only one that doesn't annoy me with its pop-up ads and stuff.
I'm a fan.
And they're our sponsors, and they help make the show happen. And also, if any of you are watching on the internets right now, you probably aren't, but if you are, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and they will get the questions to me, and we'll ask them for you as we go along. That's the business side of the way. So,
cool.
The Breakaways, Cathy. My first question always is, and I love this question, is why comics? Of all the ways that you could express yourself, what is it about comics that spoke to you, drew you in?
Yeah. So I've been a comics reader since since I could start looking at pictures, which was basically immediately upon birth. I loved comics in the newspaper. I loved comics. I loved Archie. Archie was my first comic. I loved Archie. And then I started reading Sailor Moon and manga and all that. And it seems like comics are like a really natural way to want to tell stories. There's pictures and there's words. And it feels very natural for us to be thinking about things visually as well as verbally. It feels like it just makes sense to be able to look and read at the same time. Yeah.
So Archie was your first love?
Archie was my first love, yeah.
You picked it up off the newsstands, I assume?
Yes, in Little Duke's, which was a convenience store that my family would go to on our way to camping every summer. So, shout out Little Dukes.
Right on. So a spinner rack, right, of comics.
They were sort of low, right next to like the Snickers bars, like low, right. So I could grab it.
Yeah, right.
Kids
Kids
would
level.
be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Anything to keep you quiet in the car ride, right?
Well, I would get sick every car ride. I don't know if you guys get sick. I got sick every single car ride. It was horrible.
Okay.
But once you get camping, I don't know if you guys have gone camping before, but usually you just sit outside for days and you don't do anything. So reading comics was like the way I would pass the time.
Yeah. You know, very much a lot of camping for me is sort of sitting and staring at the middle distance. You know, just being in nature.
To turn your brain off.
Exactly.
Hanging out in nature. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Read some books.
Yeah. What else did you read when you were a kid?
So it was all newspaper strips like Garfield and maybe Far Side, but Far Side can kind of get adult.
Calvin?
Calvin a little bit.
Okay.
It was almost strictly Garfield. Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes, you're right. But it was almost strictly Garfield.
Right.
Because they had little collections in the library that I would go and check out. And then I read Archie. I read all the Archie digests, the little digests, like not all of them because there's decades worth of Archie.
Sure.
And then basically around when I was 7 or 8 years old, that's when Sailor Moon started to get published. And I was looking into the history of it, and I own like the first Sailor Moon that was published.
Okay.
Like in like the thin floppy type. That Tokyo Pop, which was not called Tokyo Pop at the time, it was like
Comics Mix.
Comics Mix.
Yep.
And then I have like the very first few issues of that. So I must have just been waiting for comics because at the time there weren't a lot of comics for kids.
Yeah, it's true.
It was all like Spawn, and it was like all really scary.
Yeah. Well, and even more so at the time, comics it was a point of honor that comics weren't for kids.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and this is history. You guys are probably totally bored by this kind of history.
Well, I'm 29, so
Right.
I'm almost the age of this store.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. Yeah. Wow, that's scary. Now I feel old.
Congratulations, Brian.
But yeah, no, comics were comics actually went in front of the Congress. There was a hearing that said that comics were un-American and were turning children into perverts and weirdos because they had violence in them and things like that, and juvenile delinquency was ascribed to comics. So for like 20 years in this country, nobody read comics. Nobody thought it was. They thought it was just a poor children's medium. And so during the period that you're talking about, the comic book publishers were all like, "No, comics are for adults. They're adulty. They're real super adulty like."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so basically every time I try to go to a comic book store to get Pokemon cards, I don't know if you guys know what Pokemon is, but I would go to the comic book store to buy Pokemon cards because it was a game and comics shop. And all the comics looked really scary. Like, I feel like I couldn't go in there. They were really adult. They totally weren't for me.
Right.
So when they started to publish manga, Japanese comics, they put them into bookstores, like normal bookstores, which I felt safe going to as a young child.
Sure.
Yeah. And then eventually comic stores started to catch on.
Yeah. Yeah. Took a while. It certainly took a while. And now they're bright and shiny like this. Yay! Very good. What's the first comic you remember drawing? Because I imagine as a kid you were...
Totally. Do you guys know Powerpuff Girls? The cartoon? Yeah. So I did Powerpuff Girls based comics.
Okay.
I did a little zine. I cut it up and I folded it. So zines are self-made, handmade little books. And so I folded it up, and it was sort of like Powerpuff Girls style. It was a duck and a raccoon, and the duck was drowning, and the raccoon saved it, which is sort of the opposite of how you would think. You would think the duck would be fine in the water. Right. I think raccoons are pretty good swimmers too, actually. So the duck is drowning, and then the raccoon goes and saves him. And I made a little book, and I gave it all to my friends and stuff and family.
And how old were you, do you think? Or what grade was this?
5, 6 years old, maybe.
Wow, that young.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When I was like 3, my art was just cutting up paper into tinier paper. I love to cut paper up like a lot. So I ended up doing a lot of handmade books. That was like my big thing, actually. I loved making books. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Did you go to school to study art, making comics? Or did you have another goal in mind?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I went into, my last 2 years of high school, my junior and senior year, I went to an art high school, and I made zines, I self-published comics, I would sell them to comic book stores to then sell for me. And then when I went to college, I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, Maryland. I did! My major was interdisciplinary sculpture. Yeah, that's what sculpture. As I don't know,
maybe we should
Emma,
have you.
She's not mic'd.
I think we have to have you doing the interview, Emma.
I chose to do sculpture because that's where all the cool kids were. No, because sculpture was like where it was like it was really conceptual. So it was all about ideas and coming up with cool things to make that were all about ideas rather than just drawing pictures. And also I was sort of like, I can draw pictures. I've been drawing my entire life. I don't need someone to teach me how to draw. So I didn't want to do illustration or comics or anything. I decided to do sculpture so I could like work with wood and work with clay and work with metal and do all this fun stuff that I didn't know how to do. Because that's what school's for, doing stuff you don't know how to do, right?
And what did you think you were going to do after school? Or had you not really thought that out?
I was always doing comics, not in class.
Right.
And then my senior thesis was my first graphic novel, Jeremiah, which was 160 pages because my sculpture teachers told me that I could make a comic book if I wanted to, if it was really thick. So it was sculptural.
Okay.
So I made like a big book because it was 3-dimensional.
Okay.
And they let me do it. So.
That's it's interesting logic, but okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's cool. Jeremiah is a fantastic. Now, Jeremiah is not a comic for kids.
Thank you.
So I can't really recommend it to the room. But if you're watching at home and you're not a kid, definitely. Is it still in print? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
1% Press.
Okay.
Yeah, it came out, I guess, 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I remember it was one of, because that was like the second or third month we had started the book club, and we were actually considering it.
Cool.
It was on the short list to be a selection back when we were starting this whole thing. And it's a really, really beautiful, kind of sensitive book. So that was a senior thesis. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. Had you been working on that prior to it getting accepted as a senior thesis, or did you convince them to let you do a comic and then came up with it at that point?
Yeah, I think I started writing it around 2009, so that would have been my sophomore year of college. So I would have been 19 years old, 20. And then so I was writing it and just sketching it, and almost all my books, graphic novels, because they're so long and they have so much story and characters and stuff in them, I end up like thinking about it and taking notes and writing about it for years before I actually start drawing it or like really hardcore working on it. So I think I was conceptualizing it years earlier, but then around senior year, I was like, I'm ready to draw this. And then my sculpture teachers were like, sure.
So did you, when you were conceptualizing it, did you picture it as a 160 page book at that point?
Yeah.
You did, okay.
Yeah.
So you were ready in your head to graduate from mini comics to...
Yes. I think I always felt, so I did mini comics, so like comics that were like 16 pages long, just little guys that you could print and make yourself, like on a Xerox printer or something. But I think I always felt that to be stunting. But you need a lot of time to commit to drawing a whole graphic novel, to writing a whole graphic novel. It takes a really long time. And so when you're doing, like, when I'm going to class and stuff, I just didn't have the time to be able to focus and do a long book until my senior thesis, where your class load is sort of lessened, and then
so you can put the time into the work.
So you can put the time in. Yeah. But I think I was ready to I always wanted to tell long stories. I always wanted to tell stories, like really get to know the characters in a story. So it
didn't make you nervous to go from that shorter form to 10 times longer of a form? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
I've always wanted to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, that's great. And then you have this thing that you did for your senior thesis. How did it then get published?
So I put it, okay. So I graduated college in 2011, and then in 2012, I moved back home to my parents' house, and then I pitched it to publishers. I pitched it to First Second, who's the publisher of the Breakaways that you're all holding in your hands. So I pitched it to First Second, and First Second turned it down. But the editor offered to call me, Callista Brill, who is my editor for the Breakaways as well. She offered to call me in 2012 and tell me why they didn't want to print my book. And so it's interesting. It's like getting a bad grade or something, and then you have to go and talk to your teacher, and your teacher's like, well, I'll tell you why you got the bad grade, and it makes you feel bad, but you're like, I want to know so next time I can do a better job, right? So it's like exactly the same thing, where I decided, since this publisher didn't want to put out my book, was offering to talk to me about it, I said, yes, bring it on. Tell me everything that I can do differently for my next book pitch. And then, so she told me it all. I took down notes, and then years later, I sent her the Breakaways book pitch, and then she bought it the next day.
Oh, nice. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it took her 24 hours.
That's fantastic.
But I think it's because we've had this relationship that previously, so even though they didn't want to actually print my first book, I had built a relationship with this publisher. So it was still a really positive experience. And then so no one wanted to put it out. Another publisher who will remain nameless wanted it, but wanted me to change the ending. which I did not want to do because it's my book and I wanted it to end the way I wanted it to end. And so I decided to self-publish it. And first thing I did was actually put it all on the internet as a webcomic. A lot like the newspaper strips that I read when I was your age. I put it online, so I put 3 pages online a week, so it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay.
Because it was all already drawn, so it was easy enough to have like a regular updating schedule. And then it sort of built an audience for people who just enjoy webcomics. And then after it had built an audience, I printed it myself, and then I won an award. I won the Ignatz Award in 2014 for Promising New Talent. And then in 2015, 1% Press bought it to print it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it was like, so it went from originally coming up with the idea in 2009 to finally being printed by a publisher in 2015.
Yeah.
So it took 6 years. And actually the Breakaways also took 6 years.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So that seems to be my track record.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, again, doing a big book like this, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about your pitch on the Breakaways.
Okay.
That you said they accepted in 24 hours. What can you describe the pitch, the process of doing a pitch in a way that these guys, you know, can understand and enjoy, obviously, but yeah.
So I would say a book pitch is like, have you guys ever written a book report? Right? Where you read a book and then you write about what it was about and all the characters and the plot summary and stuff like that? Yeah? It's like a book pitch is a book report before you make the book.
That's cool.
So it's like a summary of what the book is going to be about. It's like all the characters. It's a bunch of drawings just to show the publisher what the book will look like. And then because it's unlike a Word book, I need to show them what the story is going to be, but I also need to show them what the art is going to look like. And then I sent it to them. So it's like pictures and it's like a summary and like talking about the characters.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was like 15 pages.
Okay. And how many pages of it were comics as opposed
Yeah,
to...
so 15 pages of it were comics.
Okay.
And then I had like a few pages of summary, a few pages of character.
Right.
So the Breakaways has, I don't know, like 15 main characters in it. So I talked about each of those characters and who she was and stuff like that.
Cool. And they took it the next day. That's amazing.
They took it the next day.
That's got to be a great feeling too, right?
It was.
Yeah.
Because it was about a year of work because I had written the full draft of the script. I had been working on this book pitch, and I had been working on it from 2013 to 2014. So it was like I had been working on it for a full year. So it was a ton of work, but then it got rewarded. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be. Yeah, please.
You said that there are like 15 main characters, but
Yeah.
isn't Faith the main character?
Faith, you're right. You're right. Good catch. So Faith is the main character, but then a lot of the times the other characters, there's like a lot of scenes where Faith isn't in the scene, and then there's other characters. Yeah, but you're right. So there's.
I haven't finished the book yet.
You haven't finished.
I got it today, so I might. I'm on page 100.
You're right. Faith is sort of the main character. You're right.
It's interesting, sort of related to what she said, that this book, this is not a negative at all, has less plot than I think that perhaps we're used to in a lot of the books that we read in the thing, where there's like a direct story, like somebody finds a map that leads them to a train, there's stories, where this is much more slice of life.
Yeah.
Was that, obviously they accepted the pitch in a day,
Yeah.
so that wasn't a challenge for the publisher. Was it a challenge for you to, how do you structure a story and keep people's interest over 200 something odd pages without having sort of that narrative to drive it?
Yeah. So I think that books and stories can be anything. I feel like it's almost unfair that there should be one main character who drives the whole story and you're always focused on that one character, because in real life there's people all around you, right? You have tons of friends, you have tons of people that you go to school with, you have people in your neighborhood, you have people in your family, there's lots and lots of people in our lives. And so I wanted to tell a story about all the people that you might know. So it's like, it focuses on Faith, but she joins a soccer team, and then that soccer team, there's 11 other girls on that soccer team. And then so we learn about each one of those girls and her life.
Yeah.
So because I just feel like I really wanted to tell a story about like like how many people are in the world and how many people, like it's a story about empathy and learning about others, and like learning about how their life might be the same but then also might be different from yours.
Yeah. You guys liked that approach, right? Yeah. Good. Okay. Because I was actually, when I picked this book, I was a little worried it might be a little challenging for some of you guys. But I'm not getting any looks that make it seem like it was. That's good. Do any of you have any questions for Cathy? I can keep talking, but no?
All right.
No questions? And if there's anybody watching on the internet, once again, feel free to ask a question there in the chat and we will get it. Okay. Let's talk about craft then. How do you draw? What's your process?
Yeah, so
Or actually, maybe we should say, how do you put a book together? Let's start with that.
Yeah. First, I write the whole script.
Okay.
Just like on the computer. And then
And how detailed is the script? I mean, are you going long descriptions, or because it's in your head, you're short?
This script was actually really, really detailed.
Okay.
Because something that the editor had told me about my first book was that I had already drawn and written the whole thing. I already had a finished book. And so she told me about how she wanted to be able to edit it. She wanted to be able to change it and like give feedback and then be able to change that. So like, but if it's already drawn, it's really hard to like erase a comic panel and draw a new panel or something. It's like really difficult. So I decided to, for this book, to write the entire script in a way that other people would be able to understand it and read it and be able to edit it and work with it with me. So I also have an agent, Jen Linan, who helped edit it as well. And then I had friends help edit it, and and Callista, the editor, be able to help edit it. So like I was able to get all sorts of feedback because I wrote sort of a much more detailed script, which almost feels like it's not the instinct of a cartoonist to want to do that, but I did it in order to benefit the book in the long haul. Yeah. Sure. And then, so then I got edited, then I did thumbnails, which are like tiny, simple sketches of what the script is going to look like, right? So just little, where the character is going to be standing in a room, who she's talking to, what angle their faces are at, things like that. And they're called thumbnails because they're really tiny. I draw them about this big, but not thumbed. I draw everything, it's all by hand. Because I don't like staring at a computer. It hurts my eyes. We all stare at computers a lot, and I try to minimize that as much as possible. So I did that with a normal pencil, and then all the people I just listed, they looked at the thumbnails, and they gave me their feedback on the thumbnails, and then some changes took place, and then I'd start doing the final pages, and then first thing I did was sketch them. I sketched them on normal printer paper like you have in your house.
Like 8.5 by 11?
It was 11 by 17.
Okay.
So just like normal cheap printer paper. I drew it all with like yellow number 2 pencils. Sharpened them. I have like hundreds of too short pencils that I'm also a teacher. So I bring all the pencils to my students because when a pencil becomes too small, I have like these really big hands. So when a pencil's too small for my hand, for young people, they can still use it because their hands are smaller than mine. So that's actually handy.
Ba-dum-bum.
Huh?
Ba-dum-bum, the handy.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. See, I was expecting ba-dum.
All right.
And then I traced that using like a light box, so like a box with like a light underneath. so you can see through paper, right? And then I traced the pencils with ink on another sheet of paper.
Okay.
And then it starts to get complicated without visuals to show you guys. But then each page has about 4 different ink layers.
Okay.
Because I wanted my colorist, Kevin Chapp, to be able to have some lines to color. So like, not all lines in the book that I drew are black. There's some that are in color. I don't know if you all noticed. Because I wanted to have some dimensionality. Like in the trees, that's a good place to spot it. In fencing, stuff like that. Because I just didn't want it all to just be black. And then, so I layered all my tracing with the inks to have different layers. And then, I also lettered it. So I wrote the words too. And then the lettering was separate from the inks. It's starting to get a little boring. The lettering was separate from the inks, because I have, you guys know what dyslexia is? Yeah, so it's when you're reading and you mix up letters. I have something called dysgraphia, which is like dyslexia, but for when you're writing words. So when you're writing, I mix up my letters while I'm writing. I know how to spell the word, I just write it wrong. And so I always, when I'm like in school and stuff, I always take notes with pencil because then I can erase it and fix my spelling. But when you're inking a comic, you have to use a pen, so you can't erase. So I did all my spelling, all my lettering for the comic on a totally different sheet of paper, because then I could misspell and cross it out and like edit it later on the computer. So if you look at my letterings, there's like tons of misspelling and all these crossing out and stuff, because I just know who I am, and I just knew I needed to be able to edit it as much as I wanted to and not like stress out about it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious why, given that limitation, it's not even a limitation, that challenge?
It's just a
maybe?
difference.
Yeah, that difference, given that difference, perfect. Why did you decide to hand letter and not have a font made of your handwriting? And because many of the cartoonists that we talk to, obviously we've talked about this before, they do computer lettering.
Yeah, so I really wanted to do it by hand because I feel like in comics, like we talked about before, it's not only visual, but it's verbal. So even though they're just words, I feel like those words are part of the art. They're in the page. And I felt like it was really, really important to me to be able to do it by hand, so all the letters are original. I get really picky about it, so like every page is original, and then if later on the publisher wanted to change some phrases, I did it by hand and sent them the new one instead of letting them graphic design.
Right.
Because I just want all of it to be original. Yeah. Because it's just like all the drawings are different on each page. I felt like all the letters should be on different on each page.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah. I just, you know, like I said, given the difference, it seems like it would be easier to do it the other way.
It probably is easier.
But
I
love it.
Mine is the way I wanted
it. Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be.
We don't make comics to be easy.
Sure. How long did it take you, would you say, to do a page? Start to finish. Obviously, you're not doing them start to finish in that fashion, but
I don't know, a couple days. Yeah, with lunch in between and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
A couple days. Yeah, because like a lot of the reasons it took 6 years was that I got a master's degree in that time. I did a whole other book in that time. I was so the actual drawing took like a year and a half or so.
Okay.
But there's just so many factors in having a book come out that it took 6 years. But me actually drawing it only took a year and a half or so. So I think I would have a page done every couple days. Yeah, I think that's probably about how it shook out. And I gave myself weekends because I wanted to hang out with my friends and stuff.
Yeah. How much time doing comics, is it every day for you? Is it like 6
it's
to 8
every day.
hours? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say 10, 12
Wow.
hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I would spend in my studio, show
Yeah.
up in the morning,
Yeah.
leave in the evening.
Yeah.
But so part of it is like, I love to pace myself.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to stress out.
Yeah.
I don't want to feel rushed. So I'm not like in the studio, like, you know, like I'm like drawing a little bit, watching some TV, you know, keeping it chill.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep yourself loose on it.
Because I do it every day.
Sure.
Like I don't take a days off.
Sure.
So like if you're doing something every single day, it shouldn't be stressful.
No, absolutely. Yeah. You should enjoy your work. That's
Enjoy it.
work should be enjoyable. That's the hope, at least. I know ours is. Do you guys have I asked everything? Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Like, where did you get the characters' names from?
Ooh, that's a great question. So can I actually see a book?
Yeah.
So we have Faith, the main character. So we have Marie, so this is Marie. Marie is named after an author that I really love, named Marie Calloway.
Okay.
So she's an author of books that I enjoy reading. Then we have Hong. I knew someone named Hong, and I thought that was a cool name. Mm-hmm. Then we have Zoe. So Zoe's original name was Mara, but the publisher says Mara and Marie were too close. Mara was a college roommate of mine, and then Zoe was another college roommate.
Okay.
So Zoe's named after my college roommate, Zoe Keller. She's actually a great artist. Then we have Bulldog and Warthog, because they rhymed, and I thought they were fun. And part of what I wanted for this book was to have really cool nicknames. When I was in soccer, so it's about a soccer team, right? When I was in soccer in 6th grade, my nickname was Spike.
Uh-huh.
No one called me that. I wanted to be called Spike. And so I was like, aren't nicknames really cool? Don't you wish you could just have a cool nickname? So I really wanted to have some cool nicknames for the kids in this book, because that's something I always wanted.
Yeah.
And then so we have Warthog and Bulldog. And also the team is called the Bloodhounds, so that's where the dog thing comes in. And then we have Soda Can, and Soda Can is named after my friend's cat, who is named Soda Cat.
Okay.
So she's not actually named after a soda can, which is just an object. Mm-hmm. She's named after a cat named Soda Cat, who was named after a soda can, I'm guessing.
Probably. So all roundabout.
So basically, named after a cat, which is named after a soda can, so basically she's sort of named after a soda can.
So really, yeah, you're right. So she's really named after a soda can, but she's named after a cat named after a soda can. Yes. Mm-hmm. So Sammy is also named after my friend's mom's cat, who's named Sammy, who's like 19.
Wow.
She's a very old cat.
That's an old cat.
I was like kind of worried when this book was coming out. I was like, I don't know if Sammy's going to be around to see her debut, but Sammy's still with us. And then V is named after someone I knew named V. Nadia. I think Nadia is one of the only ones who I don't know. I don't know a Nadia.
Okay.
I guess it's just a random name. And then we have Yara Lise. I had a student named Yara Lise before. And then Matilda. I just thought Matilda was a fun name. Mm-hmm. And then Marcus, who is Jalissa's brother. Right. Jalissa is also sort of a random name. And then Marcus is named after my own brother, who's named Mark.
Okay.
So, and Marcus was sort of the mean nickname to call him.
Very good.
So.
And when you have people who are like, based off your college roommates, is it just the name, or is the visual similar?
It's
characteristic?
Just the
name. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So like Yara Lise is a name that from a student that I had once, because I'm also a teacher. Mm-hmm. But I felt like it was really important to never base one fictional character, off of like one person. They are like lots and lots and lots of people, all combined into different characters. Yeah. And part of that was because I wanted my characters to be realistic, but I also didn't want to tell anyone else's story, right? I wanted to be able to have realism to it, but also it's just other people aren't my story objects.
Sure, of course.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
So I want everyone to be able to tell their own stories. So there are characteristics that I pulled from people that I know in real life, but no one is one person at all.
Very good.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite character? No.
Nope.
That's good. That means they were all good. Very good. Anybody else have a question? Do you have a question?
When you were writing the book, did you like one character, or do you like one character more than the others? Is there like one that you really like?
So a character I really like. So they're all my favorite, obviously. Sorry, I can't choose one. But who do I really like? I think I worked really hard so everyone had her moment. I think Yara Lise, who's the goalie, she's the coolest one out of the whole book. I don't know if you've read it, but she's like the coolest person.
I would agree. Yeah, I'd agree.
So I'd say it was Yara Lise.
Yeah.
Also, when you were writing the characters, did you make any of the characters with certain aspects you really liked? Like, did you, on purpose, try to make one character that you really liked and like some of the other characters with traits that you didn't like, or did you make all of them with some traits that you liked and some that you didn't?
Yeah, that's exactly right? So like when we know people in our life, sometimes it seems like that person is mean, but it's like she's only mean to you maybe in that one moment in school. But maybe she's got different parts of herself, of her personality when she's at home with her friends or when she's with her family and things like that. Because I don't think there's ever a person, I feel like we all have the capacity, we all can be mean sometimes, you know? And sometimes we can all be really nice. And so it was really important to me actually to have characteristics that seemed negative and also were positive. Because I think everyone is like a full human being. So that's an awesome observation. Good job.
Yeah, I agree. In the back.
What? One for Soda Can. Before she changed it was Cassie. Why did you choose Cassie?
Ooh, so Cassie. So Cassie is, so Soda Can decided to change her name, and it is revealed, spoilers, in the book that her real name is Cassie. And it's because Cassie, so my name is Cathy, and when I was in middle school, there was also someone in my class named Cassie, and she also had blonde hair, and we would get mixed up a lot, and I hated it so much. So I decided to name a character after Cassie, who I used to get mixed up with a lot in middle school, to like, I don't know, to like make myself feel better about that. It was like a healing tool.
That's funny.
Did you base any character off yourself?
Is any character based off myself? So
Is there any one single character that you're based off yourself?
I think it would be easy to say that Faith is very much based off of me.
Okay.
I used to go home. I didn't have a good time in school. I had a hard time making friends. And so now I have lots of friends. Don't worry about me. We're all friends here too. See, I make friends all the time. When it was hard for me to make friends, and I was really quiet, and I liked to read a lot, and then I would go home and I would just sit at my desk and draw all the time. That's all I did in all my free time. And so Faith, the main character, she does that, right? She has a hard time making friends at school, and then she goes home and draws her own imaginary worlds, and that's sort of my MO.
Were your parents supportive of
Drawing
and art and going into art? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, parents love it when you read. I don't know if you guys know this.
They do.
Kids in a book club. So whenever you want to buy something, my parents would never buy me toys or anything like that unless it was my birthday. But if I wanted a book, they would always buy me the book.
Sure.
They always would get me the book. and they would always get me art supplies because it's like being creative and reading is like so good for you and good for your imagination and good for your development. So my parents were really supportive of that. They were not so supportive of like all the Transformer toys I wanted to buy. Yeah.
Very good.
One more question.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Is there like any character that like is there any single character that like that you think represent like did you base any characters off your parents?
Of my parents?
Yes.
Oh, the dad is my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a dad. It was really important to me. So Faith's dad. It was really important to me to just have like a really nice dad who was like, just like really supportive. He buys them McDonald's in that one panel, but I've made the M upside down. But like, just like a really nice dad who just like picks up his daughter from soccer practice and lets them have sleepovers. Yeah, that's totally my dad.
Nice.
Did you base any character off your mom?
So I don't know. I don't think I did. There's only like, so there's that dad and then there's the coach who isn't a very nice coach. So that's not based off of anyone I know because that wouldn't be very nice of me. That's Hong's dad, yeah. Nope, no one's based off my mom. No. Yes.
I haven't finished the book yet,
Okay.
but maybe it gets revealed later in the book. But do you say what happens to like why she doesn't have a mom? Why they never mention her
Yeah, so Faith has a single parent household. It's just her and her dad at home. I'd never talk about why Faith has a single parent household, and it's because there's a lot of people who only have one parent at home, and there's lots of reasons why you might just have one parent. You could be adopted, you could have, like a parent could just not be around anymore because they got ill, or they could be divorced. There's lots of reasons. But so I just wanted to be like, hey, here's a girl. She has a single parent household, and that's it.
It's just normal.
It's just normal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Is Zoe also kind of like you because she's always trying to do art?
Let's see, Zoe. Zoe has a hard time. Yeah, you're right. She has a hard time in school. She likes to hide away from other people, which is a little like me. And she's really sad. I'd say there's parts of Zoe in me too. You're right. Yeah, but at the end, I think is sort of she starts to find her friends. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And then also, what was your first inspiration for this book?
My first inspiration. Okay, so I'm a teacher, as I've told you guys a few times. I used to work with the Girl Scouts after school. So I had like, you guys know Girl Scouts. It's where a bunch of girls get together and we did like the dance badge and we would all dance together and then, or we would do like a beading project or something. And a lot of the times it was what it was about was like, it was after school, because when you're in school, you're getting graded and there's a lot of pressure on you and you're with a whole bunch of people, right? But it was an after school thing with just girls. So it was like less people. It was more like, they weren't necessarily your friends, but it was just like people that you could relate to in a different way because you have similar experiences. And then, so it was the chance to, I would always talk with all the girls in my Girl Scout troops about like, how was your day? What's a good thing that happened today? What was something that was challenging? And it was like such an opportunity to just sort of relax and talk to other people. And so I wanted to sort of talk about school because we all love to, like, books about school are like helpful. Like it's fun to read about books like slice of life books, right? But I wanted to talk about the other aspects of school. Mm-hmm. So doing a story about a girls' soccer team that was like after school, and so it was like unstructured time and how you related to other people who are like maybe not in your grade or something like that, like they were older than you, was something that I wanted to write about because I think that's like an interesting experience when you're a kid. And then, so it was inspired by Girl Scouts, but also when I was in 6th grade, I was on a girls soccer team. And we lost every game. So I wanted to write about that sort of after school time, but also my experience of losing all the time and feeling like a loser and trying to figure out, hey, how can it be a positive experience to be losing all the time? Like, how can I think this is something that, when you're growing up, that's something that you experience. Like, you aren't always winning. You aren't always doing a really good job. And so it's like, how can we talk about how not doing well at something can still be a good thing. It can still be okay, right? So that's sort of what I wanted to write about.
Yeah, no, and and this gets back to what I was, saying earlier about it not having sort of the typical standard plot structure, because a typical book like this, the ragtag band of underdogs, but they win at the end, and they're all champions, that's the very typical way that kind of a story goes. And that's one of the things I liked so much about this was it was much more real feeling and solid and the way people really are.
They find their own ways to win.
Exactly.
Right? They find their own things that they're interested in. Yeah.
Yep.
You can
come in. It's fine. Good. Any other questions from the group? You're going. I love it.
Also, do you have any ideas for what your next book is going to be?
Oh, okay. I do. I'm working on my next book. I've been writing it a year tomorrow. Like a full year. I started writing it April 15th.
Okay.
And today is April 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
My birthday's in a month.
Oh, happy birthday.
Soon.
A month and a day.
And then, so I've been working on this book. I've been writing it for a long time. I'm going to email it to my publisher soon, or my agent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to email it to my agent soon. But it's a secret. I'm sorry.
A sequel?
It's not a sequel. This book I think this one's going to be standalone.
Okay.
This is on its own.
I was going to ask because it seems like we could still tell stories about all of these characters.
Yeah. So the one character, it's like a really random character where I'm like, I could. So Warthog?
Uh-huh.
She's like the blonde mean girl.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun to do a sequel where it would be her and she becomes a vampire slayer. It would be like a completely different book.
I like that.
But for some reason, Warthog is the character because she doesn't. Little spoilers, but she's the one who has like a really hard time in this book.
Right.
Like a lot of them can have a hard time,
Sure.
but she's having a really hard time. So I think there's more for her to sort of overcome, which might be vampires.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that idea.
Warthog's the vampire slave and Bulldog's a vampire, but she doesn't.
Oh no! You're writing some fan fiction right now.
I think Bulldog just bites the entire team.
It's not a bad idea.
bad.
Not a bad idea. So the next book that you're working on, is it a kid's book?
I want it to be teenager.
Okay.
Teen, but as you guys have learned, it takes me about 6 years, so it'll be perfect for this for this group once it comes out. But I'm thinking teens.
Okay.
I'm thinking teens. Yeah.
All right. So, and we're not going to see another book for 6 years?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think 6 years seems like the longest time when you're growing up.
Yeah.
But I hope it'll take less than 6 years.
Basically, your book that you're gonna make is for kids 8 to 10.
I know. When I started, so the Girl Scout troop I was telling you about, I'm sure they've all graduated high school by now.
Right.
I'm sure they've all finished.
Yeah.
They would not. They're too old.
The book you're gonna be making is just gonna be the age of 10 or older because.
Yeah.
But in 5 years when you finish it.
Yes,
Sure.
exactly.
Sure.
You're 10 and you're 15.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is your teacher. Are you what do you teach? What are you teaching? Art?
Yeah, I'm an art teacher. I also do I teach high school, but I also teach pre-K to 8th grade, sort of after school and in the summers. And so I teach everyone basically, which is so much fun because I feel like everyone of any age is like awesome, and I do a lot of comics because like anyone of any age can read a comic and really love it. And so like we draw comics and we write our own stories. Yeah. And it's like the best. It's so much fun. And it's also really helpful for in like an art classroom to be talking about literacy and like spelling and then writing stories, and there's so many benefits to it at any age.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
What you should do maybe for one of your comic things is like give them an idea, like like here, read this comic book, then like have Warthog as a vampire slayer, then try and come and then try and come up.
I've had a fan comic for this. This book has been out for about a month now, and I did have a student draw me a fan comic, and it was Warthog and Bulldog. So I think
very good.
I think they are a fan favorite.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the shipper. Yeah.
Just tell them to read one of your books and then say like, now think of this character as this dog.
That's a great idea.
Sure.
I love that.
Sure, that makes sense.
And like blank, like now think of Faith as a
soccer star in 5 years and come up with a story.
Sure. No, those are good ideas.
comic about that.
Those are good ideas. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
What's the title of your next book?
Secret. So this one actually had 3 different titles while I was working on it. So whatever the title is, it's like temporary. It's not a real title.
Very good.
Because publishers like to change titles because usually the ones that I come up with aren't snappy enough. Can I share that?
Yeah.
All right. So the first title was Every Dog for Herself, which was a pun on like every man for himself.
Yeah. I get it, but it's not. That's not a commercial title.
But I feel like honestly, I like make up the title, and I'm like, it's funny how the title is like the title and the cover are the parts that you guys see all the time, and that's what marketing sees all the time. But when you're working on a comic, it's just like the last thing I'm thinking about. It's like it doesn't matter. Yeah. And then for a long time it was No Dogs Allowed, which was the title. But they didn't like that it had the word no in it.
Right, sure.
Because you want it to be positive.
Right.
Yeah. And then my agent came up with the Breakaways, which I love. Yeah.
What is the basis for that name? Like why did they choose
So
Breakaways?
breakaway is like a thing that you can do in sports. You can break away from a thing. I don't know. I don't know a lot about sports. I still don't quite know the rules to soccer.
Okay.
Tells you about what this book is like. So it's like a sports term, but also when you're reading the story, there are all these kids who have differences, who are still figuring things out, who are trying to make different decisions. So breaking away is like something that I felt like was like a great sort of summary of what the book is about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Now what are your title ideas for your next book?
I can't tell you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, she doesn't want to give anything away.
This is being filmed and going to be on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. So, speaking of that, since we're on the film and the internet, I wanted to ask you your name. You go by Cathy G. Johnson.
I go by Cathy G. Johnson.
Is this because of Cathy Johnson, who does For Better or For Worse?
That's Lynn Johnson.
Oh, it's Lynn Johnson. Yeah. There's not another Cathy
There's
Johnson.
a Cathy something who does Cathy with the C.
Oh, maybe that's what.
But her last name is something different. Yeah.
Okay.
It's because Cathy Johnson. There's I don't know, 3 million of us, 3 billion of us or so.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
throw in the G, and then
to-
I'm Googleable.
There you go. That's
basically what it
That was
is.
kind of the question, the Googleable question. Yeah.
It's just Googleable.
Yeah. Okay.
Because Cathy Johnson, there's like a lot of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing, I guess, because I was trying to get to it before, that there's a little URL there with the comic art edition. Did you want to plug because this is going to live forever. You know.
So comicarted.com is my teaching educational website. So it's for kids, but it's also for librarians and adults and teachers and whoever wants to do drawing and making comic books with kids. So it's comicarted.com, and I share lesson plans. I have like other books that you can check out and read. I have some bonus stuff for this book on there.
Oh, nice.
I also have my podcast, which is more geared towards adults. It's about scholarship. You could listen to it. It's not inappropriate. It's about academia. So maybe that's not interesting. So that's like sort of where I share my comic educational work, because I believe that comics are wonderful, and I think they could be more integrated in schools, and I think everyone would benefit from that.
Yeah, very much so. I agree. I want to thank you for coming out and talking to us. I want to thank you for the book. I loved this book. I thought this book was so sweet. When we get advanced copies of stuff, and sometimes I have to choose what book we're picking for the Kids Club. And I just saw this immediately, and I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful piece of cartooning. It feels real. These characters are vivid. I loved it. You guys loved it, right? You guys loved it?
Yeah.
Right? You guys loved it?
Thank you.
That was close. We'll work on that. I want to recommend to anybody who's watching at home, if you have not yet gone out and gotten a copy of The Breakaways, this is a book that you should go and get and to support. It's a fantastic book. Little bit of club business. Our next meeting, which is the May meeting, is for a book called Pilu of the Woods by Mai K. Nguyen. And she is such a good cartoonist. You guys are going to love this book. I am told that, and this is kind of cool, that we're going to get bookmarks that have a seed inside of them, so that you'll be able to plant the bookmark in the ground and grow a plant. That seems really cool to me somehow. So Pilu of the Woods, we don't have it today, so I can't give it to you today, but that event is going to be on May 19th at our usual 10 a.m. here. And I know the book after that too, but I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to get ahead of it. But you're going to love the next couple books that are coming up. Such good comics. I love comics. Oh, comics. I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank you for coming out especially. We couldn't have done this. I want to thank one more time The Beat, www.comicsbeat.com, for sponsoring these shows and helping the broadcast happen. Thank you, everybody, and we will talk to you next month.
Thank you.